10x your service design offering with Smapply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smapply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smapply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Hello and welcome to Pushing Practice on This Is HCD. I'm McKercher. I'm a designer, a writer, and I use them, they pronouns. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which I'm recording this podcast, the Wongal and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, as well as all nations across Australia. This series aims to stretch our view of human-centered design through talking with practitioners who are working beyond the double diamond, who are pushing practice. On today's podcast, I'm joined by two dear friends and fellow designers, Lauren Anseline and Ewan Black. We speak about networks for social impact, what they are, how to convene a network, and what to avoid. We also speak about the role of reciprocity in design, about network weaving, and about slowing down to deepen our impact. A content warning, we talk about death and end of life in this podcast. And while we talk constructively and the conversation is hopeful, the topic may be upsetting or destabilising for some. Welcome, Ewan and Lauren, to the podcast. Can you tell us your pronouns and the land you're located on?
Sure. My name's Ewan and my pronouns are he, they, and I live, work and play on Ghana lands here in Adelaide.
And I'm Lauren, and my pronouns are she, they, and I live, work and play on Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation.
Fantastic. So let's start with some stories about a network that you're involved in, what the network is, and maybe what it's focusing on.
Sure. So this has been a long project, actually. So we've already been working on the network itself, Lauren and I, for the last 3 years. I should probably start actually by just talking about what a network is. We actually find the language or the word network can be quite confusing for some people because it conjures instantly in their head something. And we often will try and use more organic terms like an organism or an ecosystem, which conjures a slightly different picture, which is more helpful and in terms of what we're trying to do, which is really connect a whole ecosystem of people, specifically in the end of life space. And that project, the network, was actually formed through a previous project, which was started by our colleagues Gerry Jones and Ingrid Burkett with the JO and JR Wicking Trust, who funded TAXI, the Australian Centre for Social Innovation, where both Lauren and I work, to understand where they could best invest their money and their funds to create better outcomes for people in end of life, particularly for aging Australians. And that piece of work identified a number of different barriers that were getting in the way of people achieving good outcomes, mainly lack of education around and I guess death or end of life literacy in the population in terms of what are the choices that are available to people, where can you go for support, how do you navigate the system, what are your values and how do they inform the kinds of choices that you want to make, what kind of work do you need to do in order to plan for those choices to become a reality, and how do you identify someone in your life who can advocate for you when you do find yourself in end of life. And so there was a whole bunch of issues that were identified through that project. And one of the main opportunities was about, I guess, growing and enabling a community of practitioners and change makers from across the end of life system and across Australia as a nation to come together and build relationships and see how or what collaborations might spontaneously arise from just connecting them.
I'll just build on what Ewan has just said and say, from that report Ewan mentioned, we had an inkling of who those change makers might be to come together in this network. It took a while for us to wrangle people together. One, because, they're all overcommitted to doing the good work of what they're already working on. And two, because the Impact Network was an entirely new concept to lots of people, so they weren't actually sure what they were getting themselves into. I think, we won people over in the end because, this was a systemic and collaborative effort, and that's what those change makers were most interested in. They were focused on that level of change. And of course, that wasn't an easy journey. It wasn't a clear-cut way. We're building this path as we go, and we're really honest with members about that. We're transparent that, we don't know the whole steps as well. I think it was like the third convening, Ewan and I were like, hang on, are we doing the right thing? Is this the right process that we're going through? Are we leading this, or are we being led? And the members said to us, we trust you and we want to be here on this exploration with you. And I think that really gave us the space and allowed us to actually come and be fully present and start to play and explore together. And in those first 6 months, I think we were really focused on trust building and relationships, and also working on collective systems mapping to really help people lift up out of their day-to-day and see the conditions that were holding problems in place. So that process allowed us to come down from those 6, I think, opportunity areas from the report down to 1, which was education. And members really aligned around that because they saw it as a critical leverage point to help normalize death literacy, which in turn supports better choice and control in end of life. And I think over these 2 years we've been convening, we've built this ecosystem of members that come from a diversity of experience, and we've been capturing ideas in what we're calling a portfolio, although we like to call it our garden, that's growing together. And that ecosystem of ideas has helped us to fund a project which is around a suite of end-of-life games, which is ranges from physical cards to a digital interface, all educating players around end-of-life choices. And we've gotten to the point where we reapplied for funding recently, and we were successful in getting 5 more years, which is huge for this relatively new approach in Australia to systems change. And it's really testament, I think, you and I believe, to the strength and passion of the members who have stuck with it to make this a truly functional ecosystem.
There's so many questions that we could ask, and it strikes me that this approach that you're talking about is really quite different to a traditional human-centered design project where we might do a lot of work in a design team. There might be a product or service that's being imagined or reimagined. And at some point that might meet the types of people that you're talking about who are, at the front line of systems, who are managing systems, who are funding systems. And I'd love to hear, in an impact network like you're describing, what is it that's being designed?
It's a really good question. And I think the first, thing that you have to recognize in an impact network is you don't have control over what it is that is being designed, and no individual member does. So the first thing we were actually, design is the wrong word. The first thing we were doing was actually just mapping what was from all the varieties of perspectives that we saw. And in doing that, we identified, places where the diversity of people in our network were experiencing shared challenges and had mutual interest. And so the first thing we wanted to do was identify those shared challenges, identify those pockets of energy, and really dive into those. So start connecting people. Oh, you've mentioned that this is a challenge for you. You've mentioned that this is something that you're really interested in. We know that this person has also said that. Let's just connect the two of you in a little pair. Let's see if you can have a conversation about that together, and then come back to the network with something that you're interested in and an idea that we can plant in that garden that Lauren mentioned. And I guess that is how the network grows. So it's really about identifying commonalities between people, seeking to connect them around that commonality, and then nurturing whatever comes out of their conversations. And then where appropriate, saying, oh, well, you're talking about, what we would call like an ideation process. Perhaps we can help build your capability to improve the quality of the ideation conversation you're having. We might use human-centered design tools to do that.
And it strikes me that in an impact network, we have to have some connection to what we're trying to do together. And that seems that should be true for the conveners or the facilitators of the network as well as the members. And I wonder, Lauren and Ewan, if you're comfortable, if you might share what connects you to this network, this end of life network.
I think end of life is something that is one of the most connective things that humans experience. No matter who you are on this planet, we all die. We all go through this process, and currently, there are systems in place that don't allow people to actually have the experience they want to have and really go through, a comfortable experience. People, I think, hear death or end of life and think of something that is very, very far away. But, those things can happen, very, very quickly. And it's an uncertain world at the moment, I guess, is what the point. COVID has made that quite clear. And I think my connection to this work is that as a human experience, I believe that we should all have the best experience possible going through that.
I think for me, I lost my brother. He was 27 and was in an accident and lost his life. And he was overseas at the time when that happened. And I was overseas at the time that happened. And my parents were in Scotland. And I think there was no understanding really of end of life within our family. We had lost older relatives before, and they were kind of expected. And most of those were actually quite normal occurrences of death. So, they actually, my grandfather died at home with us, which was a really lovely experience. It was actually something that we connect around and we talked openly about at the time. When we lost my brother, that was out of the blue. It was unexpected. We had not really talked to each other about, I guess, what we would do in the case of one of us dying. We just had never even considered that. And so it was incredibly hard. Like, we didn't have the words for it. We didn't know how to support each other. And the bereavement process was made just incredibly hard. My parents, really struggled through that for 7 years. In fact, longer than that. It's ongoing. It's probably something that will never leave, and nor would they want it to. It's something that they're going to, I guess, work through for the rest of their lives. But I don't think it needs to be that hard. I've, since then, through the network, heard stories of people who had much higher levels of death literacy and were able to kind of go on a journey in the either the lead up to their loved one dying, so they could prepare fully, or because they understood what supports were available, what complex bereavement was, they then had tools and pathways to get appropriate support, which my family didn't. So I feel like that really is what drives me. It's amazing being part of a network where everyone has a story like that. We have participants in our network who are carers, caring for loved ones who have early onset dementia. We have others who have lost loved ones, close friends, family. Turns out we actually had 3 members of our network who had been heavily involved on the ground during the AIDS pandemic. And it was through the kind of connection sections that we do at the start of every network that we started seeing these kind of personal connections to end of life. And we know that it is those personal, emotional connections that we create that actually sustain the network and enable us to lean into really complex and hard discussions, when we have different perspectives.
Thank you both for sharing your experiences. So it strikes me that some of this work, particularly in an area that can be triggering, upsetting, can ask us as facilitators to bring forward a lot of ourselves, and also ask participants to bring forth a lot of themselves into this work, and acknowledging that this has been going on for a number of years, and it also sounds like it will continue to go on for a number of years. You've spoken about the emotional connection that keeps us going in this work. This may seem like an odd departure from such a serious topic, but I wonder about the role of fun and what the role of fun is in sustaining these really long, big systemic projects.
Lauren, do you want to talk about fun? We have a lot of fun.
We do have a lot of fun. I think there's no convening that happens that doesn't include a lot of laughter, which is, you might think is strange coming from such a serious area that people see as in their lives. I think, just focusing, as Ewan said, on this relational connection is really, really important to build that trust. And I think that having fun is also based in trust, so that you can sort of let loose and have a giggle every now and again, especially, many of our members are in lockdown at the moment, and, popping up on Zoom every time, you do have to bring a certain amount of energy and joy into the room just to, get through those sticky moments.
I think there's a really, really important part of making things fun as well. There's so much dark stuff that you could get into in this space, and there are so many poor outcomes experienced, and you can get really kind of caught up in our kind of natural human negativity bias to just focus on all of that. And I think what happens when we work from that place, when we're driven and motivated by the bad things, we end up creating things that can be quite dark. And I think there's something really important about bringing light and life into the kind of dark corners of the system, and just watching how that can create like something different can really emerge when you do something from a lighthearted perspective. And that really ties in strongly to the fact that our network forms hubs around ideas that they see shared value in. One of those hubs is actually, as Lauren mentioned earlier, the network game hub. And this is a concept that was born out of, well, what are the ways that we can actually just kind of crack open the door to end of life discussions just enough and for just long enough that people will actually learn a little about themselves, about what they value, about what's important to them. And we thought, well, what about games? Like, what is the role of getting, school children sitting around playing a game all about end of life? Thinking about, out of all their friends, who would be the best advocate, who knows them best. And then, taking that game home and playing it with their families, and opening these conversations in ways that are not terrifying and not filled with fear, but actually filled with lightheartedness and connection. And really change, I guess, the narrative around death and dying as being something to be feared of and a taboo subject to talk about, but actually making it something that is, just engaging and fun and playful, and at the same time giving people the vocabulary and the space they need to actually start considering some of the ways and things that they might want to happen when they're in the end of life space. Once you know those things, you know what you value, you can start creating or bringing those things to life.
And it strikes me there's also a bit of demystifying to go on as well. And I think something that you shared with me, Ewan, was a video of a clinician talking about how we actually die and what is happening even just physiologically in the body, that the body is sort of softening and we come to just need to breathe less. And even to sort of just understand a bit about what is happening, it strikes me that there's a lot to learn, and it makes a lot of sense that focus on education as a key lever across the system. I think this idea of convening might be something that is unfamiliar to some. What is a convening? What does it involve? What are the types of rituals and routines that you undertake?
Yeah, sure. As we've talked about, it's been a really emergent process, but we have been held by these monthly convenings, which we've had continually since I think June 2019 until now. And every month we meet on a Zoom space. In the beginning, there was actually 2 spaces. We had a convening in person in South Australia in Adelaide in the taxi offices, where we'd set out some drinks and some cheeses and actually get people around a table to just have discussions. But we also knew that there were many more people, nationwide who had a lot to say about end of life and were key change makers in this space. So we also hosted an online session, and it was actually due to COVID last year that those 2 groups became one. And it's been actually one of the most, I guess, it's changed the network for the better because it's connected us across those barriers of space. But in terms of rituals, we try and lead every convening, acknowledging the land we're on and where we're coming from. In Australia, we always lead with a connection section, like Ewan said, something that's about building our knowledge of each other as people instead of just focusing on, if you go to a networking event, it might just be about like work and not who are you, but what do you do? So we're always focusing on the who are you in this. And, the content of those monthly convenings are often, can be very different. It could be the strategy of the network in one convening, and then into another one, we might be really focused on, developing some game prototypes or, doing a systems map. But we always end the same way in that we do a chat waterfall, which is asking everyone in the group to type into the Zoom chat box where they feel like the network should be going next and what actions they feel like they should do. And it's through that part of the agenda that we build the emergence and understand actually what the group wants to to be led by the group rather than us setting a process or a direction. And then we'll check out of the space together just so that we're leaving each other. And we also have we had a place where people could come and share challenges. We call this the peer input process, or it's also a challenge clinic. And we're moving into more terms around a hub accelerator, which is where people could bring a challenge they have in their space. The last person who did this has created a incredible online personality called DD Dieright, and it's a incredible performance piece of just fun and play and exploring death in a different way. But she felt so vulnerable about putting that out there. She wanted the group to actually support her, to understand, if is this the right thing? Am I being tone deaf? What am I missing? And by showing it to the group, she sort of said, I started out in this really small space, but then I just grew and grew and grew, and it became this really big, amazing thing. So that's another way we're trying to support people to come together and support each other in the network.
And I wonder, Ewan, if there's particular people that you've drawn inspiration from, whether they're sort of network theorists, leaders, practitioners, or other types of practitioners.
Start with a big shout out to June Hawley. We have learned so much from the Network Weaver Handbook and the Network Weaver website, which is based on work that June has done for many, many years with many, many networks in the United States. And actually, we came to June's work a little late in the piece. It wasn't straight away. We had, I guess, pulled on a number of articles that we found in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. We had read a book called Connecting to Change the World. I can't remember the names of the authors on that one. And there was a number of different things that kind of started coming together. And I think for us, the first cementing thing that we did was actually, I guess, theme everything that we had learned into a poster which contained a series of activities that we felt were important to consistently do within our network. I guess 4-step governance framework, a series of mindsets which we felt were really important for how we showed up and how we worked with each other in the network. And then, a bunch of things that we could do or align around. So I guess going from this kind of what works in the network, what mindsets do we need and what activities will we do together. But June's work has been amazing. And recently we have connected with June, and we're going to be writing about this project for the Network Weaver website and blog. And we've done a little video about closing triangles, which is an activity where literally if you identify a gap or a need or a diverse perspective that we don't have in the network and you're connected to someone with that perspective, you then seek to understand where their passion or interest in the end-of-life space is and then connect them to someone else in the network who might be interesting. So we're always trying to close these little triangles and form new sets of pairs who we then can connect with other pairs and form hubs, which are groups of pairs working on or learning about particular interest areas. And those are all autonomous. So they're not things that we sit in and manage. I guess going back to the kind of organic metaphor from the beginning of our conversation, we want to be diluting our role as conveners over time and encouraging, I guess, the spontaneous connection of others to work on things together. And do things together.
And that feels very different to traditional project management, where we've got a project that we perhaps are actively trying to control, to keep on track, to manage time and manage budget. And this kind of emergent way of working that you're describing feels very rich, it feels very helpful, and it might even feel a little bit scary to some. And I wonder what advice you would have for folks who feel kind of unstable and out at sea with some of these ideas of working in such a sort of emergent way.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's something around, the way that, Western people work in the world around starting with the action and starting with the process. And I think in Tyson Yunkaporta's book, Sand Talk, he talks about, always starting with direct. And then at the end, you go to the relationships because perhaps the direction at the beginning and the action didn't work. Whereas an Indigenous way of connecting is all about respect first, reflecting, and then getting to action later, much, much later. And I think, people can feel lost and at sea when things go on a long time. We're used to very short cycles, which is why we always go with direct, because action and progress is seen as very good. But to go back to this natural metaphor, this idea of growing slowly is how this world has been built and how systems are built over time. They're dynamic and changing things. And this is why they are so well complemented to each other. This is why networks work in systems, because they are both moving dynamic things. So a moving system needs a moving ecosystem of response in a way. And I think knowing that is a response that you can be a part of and just, build the path as you go and know that there are other people on that journey. I think that brings you into a different space and into a different mindset, and actually you start behaving differently and connecting ideas differently. And I think, being held in that space together with others is just hugely supportive. It feels much more supportive than a traditional project management way of working.
Yeah, I might just build on that, just talking about the strength of relationships as being the number one factor in holding people in the discomfort of a new process, a new way of working. And secondary, having a shared purpose that is co-created that you can come back to, and we do come back to at the start of every convening. Why are we doing this? Why are we sitting in this uncomfortable space? What is it that we collectively agreed and shaped that we want to achieve? And I think that's a really powerful thing to keep people on the journey and on the path. And then the other thing that is useful is a set of principles around how we're going to be together. And just, when you are in that space of total ambiguity, being able to anchor it into some principles that can just give you enough stability to take the next step forward. I feel that they've really been important in the network.
Mm. And if I'm understanding you correctly, Ewan, it sounds like you're suggesting that we have a shared purpose, but that we don't all have to do the same thing. And we don't necessarily have to know all the things that everyone's doing.
Absolutely. So in our early research around networks, one of the kind of light bulb moments was we don't need to be a coalition, where we have to have one perspective or one take on an idea in order to, leverage broader change in the system. We don't have to be a community of practice focused on one way of doing things. What if we were an organic ecosystem where we can take, we can align ourselves to a shared challenge, and we can take independent or sometimes independent, sometimes collaborative actions towards that end goal. I feel like that's such a critical component of being in a network, that it's not all about doing the same thing at the same time to create change. It's about using a diversity of perspectives and a diversity of approaches to meet a diversity of needs. There is no such thing as a silver bullet that's going to solve end of life problems. So why would we try and create one? And I think that's part of the real value of working in a networked way, as opposed to an institutional or a traditional organizational setting. I don't think you can really do this kind of work in those environments necessarily.
And it feels like it's a way of meeting the world as it is, not as we'd like it to be, as a reduced and controllable type of thing. I wonder if, to wrap up the conversation, we could hear a bit about the designer that you were before you started working in networks and the designer that you are now.
Wow, what a wonderful thing to think about. I think when I started this type of work, I was very much focused on design and innovation and research and working with people, but in short spurts and cycles. And that was a way that was very comfortable, because you're never really there long enough to see the change, but you're sort of learning about it and talking to different people about it. And I guess that feels like it has momentum, but it's actually, it's not really momentum. It's a bit of a lie. And I'm not saying that that's not good work, because it is good work and it supports the long-term work that we do. I think starting this network, I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what we were getting into. It was a lot of Ewan and I just fumbling in the dark a lot of the time. And laying those stones as we go. And I think now, when I come into a group of people, or when I am part of a convening, it's much easier to see that my process and my way of doing things is part of a system, and it's part of my way of doing things, and that's informed by my lived experiences. But in a group of people where everyone has that as well, it's a sort of a really complex space, and it's all anchored on this idea of, complex reciprocity, which, June Holly goes into and talks about as this idea of you're giving and taking, but often not from the same person. So it's not transactional. It's not this idea of you get this, I get this. It's this idea of I give what I can to the network. for the benefit of this ecosystem. And I know I will get repaid in some way, in some form, and it's not going to be that transactional thing. So that's probably where I'm at now.
For myself, I think I was very process orientated. So, as a designer, there's process, and process has, performative function, which gets us from A to B. And I think what I've learned through the experience of working in networks is the need to work with emergence, rather than commanding and controlling something, really letting it emerge and unfold and giving to the situation what the situation is asking for. And that means you've got to really listen. You've got to listen to who's in the space, what they're saying, and join dots that not only you have to join the dots, you have to support them to join the dots. You have to support others to lead in the space. You have to show everyone that they are a leader, and give them the tools that they can then also identify other leaders. So it's all about, I guess, moving from I'll stand up the front as the practitioner and lead people through a process, to I will stand in the background and give people the tools that they can also stand in the background, so that we're constantly looking out for ourselves and looking out for other people all at the same time, and encouraging people to take ownership and take the lead, and then giving them the tools that they need, or helping them understand how to get those tools for themselves. Yeah.
Fantastic. A huge thank you, Lauren and Ewan, for our conversation today. It's been really energizing and exciting to see how many different ways of doing things there is, and what is possible when we slow down, when we focus on relationships, and when we work in a more emergent way than perhaps many of us are used to, who have those very process-driven, short time frame design backgrounds. I wonder if there's folks who have been listening to this conversation and who would like to explore the end of life space more, or to understand a bit more about that. I wonder if you could kick us off with a resource, a book, a video, something that people could watch or listen to.
So we have just started really communicating our journey. I think we've been so focused on learning that we haven't done a vast amount of communicating around our project in particular. We have just posted our first article on the Taxi website, which is taxi.org.au. Within that, we've curated a list of the materials that really informed our approach at the end of that article. And we have also embedded a video and some hopefully useful descriptions of the activities that we do. So I think that's probably a good starting off point for anyone who's interested.
Yeah, I concur with you, and I think that article was a really key piece of work that helped us pull together this last 2 years, and like everything that we've learned from the members of the network, and I think that there's still a long way to go for us. That we've got these 5 more years of funding, and I think we'll continue understanding like what that means for the folks in the network, and what it means to weave these networks together.
Fantastic. And for anyone who's been trying to capture some of the books, the people, the resources, we'll put all of those things in the show notes so that you can browse them at your leisure. But again, thank you so much, Lauren and Ewan, for joining us.
Thanks, Kellyanne.
Thanks for listening to Pushing Practice on This Is HCD. If you want to learn more about the other shows on the This Is HCD network, feel free to visit thisishcd.com. You can sign up to the community newsletter, learn about upcoming online community gatherings, or join the Slack channel where you can connect with thousands of other human-centered design practitioners around the world. Thank you for listening and see you next time.